Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar. Upon reaching the above-mentioned Vaikuntha in the spiritual world, by dint of their mystic yoga performance, perceived unprecedented happiness. They found that the spiritual sky was illuminated by highly decorated airplanes piloted by the best devotees of Vaikuntha and was predominated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is one without a second. He is above everyone. No one is equal to him, nor is anyone greater than him. Therefore, he is described here as Vishwa Guru. He is the prime living entity of the entire material and spiritual creation, and is Bhuvanaika Vandyam, the only worshipable personality in the three worlds. The airplanes in the spiritual sky are self-illuminated and are piloted by great devotees of the Lord. In other words, in the Vaikuntha planets, there is no scarcity of things which are available in the material world. They are available, but they are more valuable because they are spiritual and therefore eternal and blissful. The sages felt an unprecedented happiness because Vaikuntha was not predominated by an ordinary man. The Vaikuntha planets are predominated by expansions of Krishna, who are definitely named as Madhusudana, Madhava, Narayana, Pradumna, etc. These transcendental planets are worshipable because the personality of Godhead personally rules them. It is said here that the sages reached the transcendental spiritual sky by dint of their mystic power. That is the perfection of the yoga system. The breathing exercises and disciplines to keep health in proper order are not the ultimate goals of yoga perfection. The yoga system, as generally understood, is Astanga Yoga or Siddhi, eightfold perfection in yoga. By dint of perfection in yoga, one can become higher than the lightest and heavier than the heaviest. One can go wherever he likes and can achieve opulences as he likes. There are 8 such perfections. The rishis, the 4 Kumaras, reach Vaikuntha by becoming lighter than the lightest and thus passing over the space of the material world. Modern mechanical space vehicles are unsuccessful because they cannot go to the highest region of this material creation, and they certainly cannot reach, and they certainly cannot enter the spiritual sky. But by perfection of the yoga system, one not only can travel through material space, but can surpass material space and enter the spiritual space. We learned this fact also from an incident concerning Durvasa Muni and Maharaja Ambarisha. It is understood that in one year, Durvasa Muni traveled everywhere and went into the spiritual sky to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. By present standards, scientists calculate that if one could travel at the speed of light, it would take 40,000 years to reach the highest planet of this material world. But the yoga system can carry one without limitation or difficulty. The word yogamaya is used in this verse. Yogamaya balena vikuntam. The transcendental happiness existed. The transcendental happiness exhibited in the spiritual world and all other spiritual manifestations there are made possible by the influence of Yogamaya, the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Premanandi, Haribo, Haribo,
Haribo,
Haribo, Haribo. Well, my dear devotees, today, in this purport, we're hearing a lot of confidential um, understanding of the spiritual world. And nowhere else can we have such knowledge. It's only in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Other people talk about space exploration. They've hardly explored anything in space. The space station that they had, it's not functioning anymore. It was only 400 miles up into so-called space, or 400 miles from the Earth, and it circled the Earth for a certain period of time. Now it's not there anymore, and that's about it. They haven't gone more than 400 miles. It's like from Seattle um, to North California. So, how much have they actually, let's say, examined or explored? Almost nothing. The expanse or the expansion of the spiritual world is unfathomable. It's huge. It's beyond normal human beings' conception of space, and the astronauts and so forth. They've hardly gone much into the infinite space of the universe, and this universe is only one, but there are millions and billions and trillions of other universes. And beyond all those trillions of other universes, then there's the spiritual world, which is even bigger than all the material universes. So you see, we have to be able to expand our consciousness to understand these things. And that's what's happening here by reading the explanation of this Canto 3, chapter 15. We begin to understand little by little how vast this whole universe is. And this is only one universe out of the trillions of universes that there are. So, I mean, we're talking about trillions of universes. We haven't even explored this one universe. Just imagine the fact that there are trillions of universes and living entities in every one of those universes. So we have a long way to go before we can understand the truth about what our position is. Our position is so tiny and insignificant that it's not even a little speck in the cosmos of the spiritual world, the material and spiritual world. Okay, so and the spiritual world is even bigger than the material world. So how are we going to understand all these things? Well, we get a glimpse of it by this chapter, which is called The Description of the Kingdom of God. Is there a chapter like that in the Bible? No. In the Quran? No. They might mention a few things, but there's no detailed description as we have now in the Canto 3, chapter 15 of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, the Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum, or the greatest spiritual literature. And if we want to really understand the cosmos, or the cosmology, if we really want to understand the infinite greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, well, we'll never understand it completely because it's unending. As we think, oh, now I understand, there's an expansion takes place. So there's this competition between measurement and increment. So as soon as we think we understand, all of a sudden everything has expanded. So we have to start all over again. See? So uh, so we can never say that we have come to the end of knowledge. We can only say that we've understood only a few grains of sand in the ocean of knowledge. This was said by Newton. He was a real scientist.
Wow.
He understood whatever, and he's even greater than Einstein. Newton was amazing scientist and so forth, and he told the truth. We've only understood a few grains of knowledge in the great ocean of a few grains in the ocean of knowledge. So that's a real scientist. It's not like the puffed up nonsense scientists today who think they know something. But they also know, with their telescopes and microscopes, they also know there's so many things they don't understand. But they don't want to admit it. At least Newton admitted it. And he's one of the greatest scientists in the history of the world, of this material world. Of course, the greatest scientists are the four Kumaras and other great pure devotees. They're the best scientists. Okay, so it says here in the purport, and the Supreme Personality is one without a second. He is above everyone. No one is equal to him, nor is anyone greater than him. Now, if we just understand this one sentence or these two sentences, we get a clear statement here of how great the Lord is. No one is equal to him. No one is better than or greater than him. He's above everyone. So and then now we have a chance as devotees to actually see the Lord in his form in the temple. So we see the Lord's transcendental form as Radha and Krishna. We see the expansions of Krishna in the form of Balaji, like we did yesterday, and Bhudevi, and so forth. So whenever we want to think that we've come to the end of knowledge, it's not possible. It's infinite knowledge because everything is the fourth expansion of reality. The fourth expansion of reality is infinity. So everything in the spiritual is infinitely expanding. The moment you think, "Oh, now I understand," there's something else that happened that shows you that, oh no, there's more. Right? So there's what you call this competition between increment and measurement. Everything is expanding always in the spiritual world. So as soon as you measure something, you have to start all over again because it's increased now. While you were measuring some part of the universe or some part of knowledge, it expanded. So you have to start all over. So therefore, we're in a very, let's say, dynamic context where there is infinitely expanding spiritual knowledge, infinitely expanding universes, and that's what we would call the fourth dimension. There are three dimensions, length, width, and breadth, and the fourth dimension is infinite expansion of the length, width, and breadth. So how are you going to understand this? You can't really understand it, but we can at least have a general idea of what's happening. Of course, the puffed up scientists, and astronomers, and so forth, they think they know something with their telescopes and microscopes. Before the microscope was invented, uh, there was no knowledge at all of the microscopic reality. And once they were able to produce one microscope, they suddenly realized it's a whole new world of living entities, right? And the microscopic, through the vision of the microscope. So there are many things that are mysterious that have not even been discovered yet. It's not that everything has been discovered. No. And whatever you have discovered in the process of that, it expands. So you never get to the end of knowledge. It's impossible because the universe is always expanding. Now, besides that, I mean, that's the material part. Then there's Vaikuntha, which is trillions and trillions of times greater than the material world. And it says the Vaikuntha planets are predominated by expansions of Krishna, who are differently named as Madhusudana, Madhava, Narayana, Pradyumna, etc. These transcendental planets are worshipable because the personality of Godhead is personally rules them. It is said here that the sages reach the transcendental spiritual sky by dint of their mystic power. That is the perfection of the yoga system. The breathing exercises and disciplines to keep health in proper order are not the ultimate goals of yoga perfection. The yoga system is generally understood as Ashtanga yoga or Siddhi, eightfold perfection in yoga. By dint of perfection in yoga, one can become lighter than the lightest and heavier than the heaviest. One can go wherever he likes and can achieve opulences as he likes. There are 8 such perfections. The rishis, the 4 Kumars, reached Vaikuntha by becoming lighter than the lightest and thus passing over the space of the material world. Modern mechanical space vehicles are unsuccessful because they cannot go to the highest region of this material creation, and they certainly cannot enter the spiritual sky. But by perfection of the yoga system, one not only can travel through material space, but can surpass material space and enter the spiritual sky. We learn this fact also from an incident concerning Durvasa and Maharaja Ambarish. It is understood that in 1 year, Durvasa Muni traveled everywhere and went into the spiritual sky to meet the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. By present standards, scientists calculate that if one could travel at the speed of light, it would take 40,000 years to reach the highest planet of this material world. But the yoga system can carry one without limitation or difficulty. The word yogamaya is used in this verse. Yogamaya, balena vikuntam, the transcendental happiness exhibited in the spiritual world and all other spiritual manifestations there are made possible by the influence of yogamaya, the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So there's yogamaya and mahamaya. Is there a difference? Yes, there is. Mahamaya takes you away from Krishna, and Yogamaya brings you closer to Krishna. So those people who don't listen to, the descriptions of the kingdom of God, that's what this part of the Bhagavatam is. They're under the influence of Mahamaya, which takes them away. They're more interested in baseball and basketball and things like that. And they're not spending any time trying to understand the description of the kingdom of God. Canto 3, chapter 15. Where else can you go? Where is there any other place you can go to? Is there any other book that you can go to? And understand or somewhat the description of the kingdom of God? No. It's only in the Srimad Bhagavatam. It doesn't exist anywhere else. There might be, fairy tales like Alice in Wonderland and other things, other books that have been written by mundane people that give you some idea of, what you would call the fourth dimension. In Alice in Wonderland, she goes into this nether world, this different world where everything seems to be infinite, right? So there's a hint there of the fourth dimension, but it's like fairy tales, right? They don't understand. But you read Bhagavatam, then you really get an understanding that there's so many things that we don't understand. We don't understand about this world and about the potential of a human being. It's only when we read Bhagavatam, especially this Canto 3, Chapter 15, which is a description of the kingdom of God, that we begin to see that there's a whole expansion that's infinite, and that's the kingdom of God. And one can go there, but you have to be completely purified of all material desires and be full of spiritual desires. It's not that when you're free of all material desires, that is not the perfection of life. It's maybe one stepping stone, but to the perfection of life. But the real perfection is when you're full of all spiritual desires to please the Lord. And that actually gives you joy, just like we saw yesterday. So many people came to see, the Balaji, the Lord Balaji, in this beautiful form, and they were happy. And did you see anybody arguing yesterday? Not everybody was happy, and without drinking wine or champagne or anything like that. They were just happy by seeing the beautiful deity of Balaji and chanting Hare Krishna. And Prabhupada said, he said, in South India, the people are not really, acquainted with Krishna, and Radharani. He said, but they worship different forms of the Vaikuntha, let's say,
Vishnu.
yeah, Vishnu forms. And he said, but that's all right. He said, they can worship the Vishnu forms and chant Hare Krishna. Then it's okay. So that's what we were doing yesterday, right? We were worshiping Balaji, and everyone was chanting Hare Krishna. So even the sadhus yesterday, they started chanting Hare Krishna after saying so many different mantras. They also started chanting Hare Krishna. Not that we asked them to do it; they did it by themselves. Because there was that inspiration that they got that we should also chant Hare Krishna. Okay. It says the word Yogamaya is used in this verse. Yogamaya, Valena Vikuntam. The transcendental happiness exhibited in the spiritual world and all other spiritual manifestations are made possible by the influence of Yogamaya, the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of God. So, like I said, there's Yogamaya and Mahamaya. Mahamaya takes us away from Krishna, and Yogamaya helps us come closer and closer to Krishna. So, which way do we want to go? We should definitely want to go with Yogamaya. We don't have anything against Mahamaya doing her service, but Yogamaya is bringing us closer and closer to Krishna. And all the nonsense people, they're under the control of Mahamaya, which takes them away from Krishna. Well, the farther you go away from Krishna, obviously, you suffer. And that is a way of training nonsense people. They suffer, and eventually make it about face and go the other way toward toward Yogamaya. So why? Because they've been defeated in all of, eventually they're defeated in all their material plans. So if Krishna sees there's a sincere devotee that's still attached to material things, he will take them away. If he sees that there is a devotee who is not attached to material things, but uses all of those material things in the service of Krishna, he'll give unlimited material assets, because the devotee is not using them for sense gratification. He's using all those material assets to expand the scope of Krishna consciousness and help many people. So it all depends on what we are thinking and desiring. If we desire only to please Krishna, then you get unlimited material advantages, so that you can spread the word of the Lord. Just like, look at Prabhupada. When he comes to the United States, there's $7 in his pocket, and no devotees. No, he doesn't even know where he's going to sleep. And in a short period of time, he builds this gigantic movement, expands it all over the world. So obviously, we should just meditate on Prabhupada and what he did and what he's still doing by his potency. It's not that, oh, he's dead and gone, he's not here anymore. And no, his potency is still there in the Krishna consciousness movement, as long as we follow the regulative principles and the principles of Krishna consciousness. And he hasn't really died, because we're following his instructions, or at least we're trying to follow his instructions. That means he's still alive in our lives, and we're preaching about his glories, and basically more people are chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna,
Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Okay, so 7 o'clock. We go to 7:30, right?
Yes, sir.
So now we'll go to text 27. After passing through the 6 entrances of Vaikuntha Puri, the Lord's residence, without feeling astonishment at all the decoration, they, in the 4 Kumaras, at the 7th gate, 2 shining beings of the same age, armed with maces and adorned with most valuable jewelry, earrings, diamonds, helmets, and garments. They saw at the 7th gate 2 shining beings of the same age, armed with maces and adorned with the most valuable jewelry, earrings, diamonds, helmets, and garments. Report by Srila Prabhupada. The sages were so eager to see the Lord within Vaikuntha Puri that they did not care to see the transcendental decorations of the 6 gates, which they passed by one after another. But at the 7th door, they found 2 doormen of the same age. The significance of the doormen's being of the same age is that in Vaikuntha planets, there is no old age, so no one can distinguish who is older than whom. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha are decorated with the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, with Sankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma, conch shell, wheel, club, and lotus. So, if you ever see anyone walking around with conch shell, wheel, club, and lotus, you have a good idea, and 4 arms, you got a good idea that's the form of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, a Vaikuntha, let's say, resident that is walking around. Yeah, how can and there is something called fiction, and there's something called nonfiction, right? Now, the people that write the nonfiction books, do they talk about, someone has 4 arms and they have they're able to fly through the sky and all these different things about these transcendental devotees. No, really, they talk about things that are strange, but nothing that's transcendental. So what we're hearing now is about Vaikuntha, the spiritual world, and it's always about the beautiful form of the residence and a beautiful ultimate beautiful form of Krishna. And so there's jewelry, there's fine jewelry, fine airplanes that never crash, and there's eternity, and just like it says, the significance of the dormants being of the same age is that in the Vaikuntha planets, there's no old age. So one cannot distinguish who is older than whom. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha are decorated like the Supreme Personality Godhead Narayana with Sankha, Chakra, Gada, and Padma, a conch shell, a wheel, a club, and lotus. That means they have 4 arms, and they have the same opulences as the Lord. 2 opulences for beating the demons, and 2 opulences for pleasing the devotees. So the conch shell and the lotus is for the devotees, and the wheel and the club is for the demons. So, where else can you get this information? I don't know. They have books like Harry Potter and Alice in Wonderland, but it's all nonsense. This is the real truth. Okay, so text 28. The 2 doormen were garlanded with fresh flowers, which attracted intoxicated bees, and which were placed around their necks and between their 4 blue arms. From their arched eyebrows, discontented nostrils, and reddish eyes, they appeared somewhat agitated. Well, you would too if you're surrounded with a lot of bees, right? Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Their garlands attracted swarms of bees because they were garlands of fresh flowers. In the Vaikuntha world, everything is fresh, new, and transcendental. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha have bodies of bluish color and 4 hands like Narayana. Wow. Bluish color. Have you ever seen a blue man walking down the street with 4 arms? Yeah. Now you know that's someone from Vaikuntha. But you're never going to see it in the material world. You have to go to the spiritual world. In the Vaikuntha world, everything is fresh, new, and transcendental. The inhabitants of Vaikuntha have bodies of bluish color and 4 hands like Narayana. Very, very nice descriptions. Text 29. The great sages, headed by Sanatana, had open doors everywhere. They had no idea of ours and theirs. With open minds, they entered the 7th door of their own will, just as they had passed through the 6 other doors, which were made of gold and diamonds. So don't forget these 4 sages, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar. They never, let's say, grew up to become, mature people. They always wanted to keep their bodies like young boys. That's why they can walk through all these different doors. It's like a child, A child is never, usually not prohibited, walking around. So, the purport of Srila Prabhupada. The great sages, namely Sanaka, Sanatana, Sanandana, and Sanat Kumar, although very old in years, maintained themselves eternally as small children. They were not at all duplicitous, meaning they're not saying one thing and doing something else. There's a saying also that the tongue does not have a bone. Therefore, you can twist it any way you want. You can lie and say good things and say bad things. So therefore it says they were not at all duplicitous. Duplicitous means you say one thing but you do something else. You don't keep your promises. You're not a promise keeper. And they were not at all duplicitous. And they entered the doors exactly as little children enter places without any idea of what it is to trespass. That means that they can walk anywhere just like young kids. That is a child's nature. A child can enter any place and no one checks it. Indeed, a child is generally welcome in his attempts to go places. But if it so happens that a child is checked by the entering door, he naturally becomes very sorry and angry. That is the nature of a child. In this case, the same thing happened. The childlike saintly personalities entered all the 6 doors of the palace, and no one checked them. Therefore, when they attempted to enter the 7th door and were forbidden by the doorman, who checked them with their sticks, they naturally became very angry and sorrowful. An ordinary child would cry, but because these were not ordinary children, they immediately made preparations to punish the doorman, for the doorman had committed a great offense. Even to this day, a saintly person is never checked from entering anyone's door in India.
People.
Well, yeah, people in India. First time I went to India, one thing that really surprised me was because I was dressed with shaved head and saffron dhoti, and when we went, chanting in Delhi, people would come out of their houses and pay dandavats to us. And I was seeing that, it was like a little, let's say, taken aback because they're doing full dandavats. That means we have to be really careful not to do any nonsense. Because we had saffron saris, dhotis, we had shaved heads and Sika and all that. That meant that we were supposed to be real sadhus, and people know that you have to pay your respects to real sadhus. So that was a real wake up call for me that we have to, the rest of our life we have to live like genuine sadhus, not do any nonsense. Okay, so text 31, right? 30. So 30, I'm sorry. The 4 boy sages who had nothing to cover their bodies but the atmosphere. That means they were walking nakedly. Looked only 5 years old, even though they were the oldest of all living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. But when the porters, the people who were guarding the door, saw the sages, they blocked their way with their staffs, despising their glories, although the sages did not deserve such treatment at their hands. So now we're getting a much deeper, let's say, narrative of what happened when the 4 Kumaras were stopped to go to Vaikuntha by the doorkeepers, Jaya and Vijaya. The 4 sages were the firstborn sons of Brahma. Therefore, all other living entities, including Lord Shiva, are born later and are therefore younger than the 4 Kumaras. although they looked like 5-year-old boys and traveled naked, the Kumaras were older than all other living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. And that's a very significant statement because what would you do if you see these young 5-year-old boys walking around naked? Well, you usually don't see anything like that. On top of all that, they are, the top sadhus in the whole universe. They're the firstborn sons of Lord Brahman. And it says, therefore, all other living entities, including Lord Shiva, are born later and are therefore younger than the 4 Kumaras. So, therefore, we have to read the Shastra to understand things as they are. Like, for example, when I was in India a long time ago, we were in the temple in Delhi, not in Delhi, Vrindavan. And all of a sudden, there's a little bit of a commotion, and there was this sadhu. He walked into the temple, and he had a pin, a big pin that, and he was naked. He had this big pin that was piercing his genitals, and he also had his arm up like that, and he hadn't put his arm down for like a long time. And they let him into the temple. They didn't stop him because he was a real sadhu, walking naked. And he came in and he had darshan of deities. Nobody stopped him. And you only see these things in India. You don't see it anywhere else. They didn't stop him because he was a real sadhu. His whole life was a life of austerity. Does that mean that he's a very exalted spiritual person? Well, there's an argument for it. It depends, how he's living in privacy. He's smoking marijuana and things like that. But this guy looked really authentic. He was given full liberty to walk into the temple naked, and no one said anything. I was a little surprised. But he was considered to be a genuine sadhu. That means, what is a genuine sadhu? Who engages in tapasya and doesn't do any nonsense, doesn't smoke marijuana, doesn't have illicit sex or anything like that. Therefore, he can walk around. He had this, like, it wasn't a little pin, it was some kind of a nail, right through his genitals. It's like unbelievable. Okay, it says, although they looked like 5-year-old boys and traveled naked, the Kumaras were older than all other living creatures and had realized the truth of the self. Such saints were not to be forbidden to enter the kingdom of Vaikuntha, but by chance the doorman objected to their entrance. This was not fitting. The Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras, but in spite of knowing this fact, the doorman astonishingly and outrageously prohibited them from entering. So this was in Vrindavan, this was at the Iskon temple. The sadhu walks in, he's completely naked. You can see that he's got, ashes, white ashes over his whole body. He's got, matted hair, really, really long. It's like he was coming, behind him, really big matted hair. And, and you could see, the devotees didn't stop. They didn't come in, just like this. But here, the uh, two persons who are guarding the entrance, but by chance the doorman objected to their entrance. This was not fitting. The Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras, but in spite of knowing this fact, the doorman astonishingly and outrageously prohibited them from entering. So in India, there are crazy people who pretend to be sadhus, and there are also genuine sadhus that walk around naked, right? So how do you know the difference? That's the question. Well, anyway, that day when I was there in the temple in Vrindavan, the devotees let the sadhu in. He had matted hair, he had ashes on his body, right? And he had his arm up like this because apparently it was one tapasya he was doing. Day and night, his arm would be like this. Even when he slept, his arm would be like this. And he was happy, and the devotees let him in. So, I was like really surprised to see that.
And unfortunately, in India, there are more pretenders than the genuine. This. That's the reason it's very, very difficult to figure out.
I know. This one must have been genuine because they let him in. Such saints were not to be forbidden to enter the kingdom of Vaikuntha, but by chance the doorman objected to their entrance. This was not fitting. The Lord is always anxious to serve sages like the Kumaras, but in spite of knowing this fact, the doorman astonishingly and outrageously prohibited them from entering. Okay, let's see what's going to happen. When the Kumaras, although by far the fittest persons, were thus forbidden entrance by the two chief doorkeepers of Sri Hari, while other divinity looked on, their eyes suddenly turned red because of anger, due to their great eagerness to see their most beloved master, Sri Hari, the personality of Godhead. So the Kumaras, it was their eyes that turned red, and they became angry. They were not allowed to enter. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. According to the Vedic system, a sannyasi, a person in a renounced order of life, is dressed in saffron-colored garments. This saffron dress is practically a passport for the mendicant and sannyasi to go anywhere. The sannyasi's duty is to enlighten people in Krishna consciousness. Those in a renounced order of life have no other business but preaching the glories and supremacy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, the Vedic sociological conception is that a sannyasi should not be restricted. He is allowed to go anywhere and everywhere he wants, and he is not refused any gift he might demand from a household. The four Kumaras came to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. The word Shutra, best of all friends, is important. As Lord Krishna states in the Bhagavad Gita, he is the best friend of all living entities. Tridam Sarvabhutan. No one can be a greater well-wishing friend to any living being than the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So see, that's a very important word, well-wishing friend. Prabhupada would always sign his letters, your well-wishing, let's see, how do you sign it?
You are ever well-wishing.
You're ever well-wishing.
Yes, yes.
Therefore, the Vedic sociological conception is that a sannyasi should not be restricted. He is allowed to go anywhere and everywhere he wants, and he is not refused any gift he might demand from a household. the four Kumars, oh, let's see, now there's a story. There was one sadhu, and he would regularly come to the house of a disciple that he had. And he would come and give his blessing or whatever. And he always give a hint. He'd say, your refrigerator looks very nice. So that was a signal to give him the refrigerator. So they would deliver the refrigerator. And then he'd come back the next time. He was coming frequently. Before he'd leave, he'd say, oh, this sofa you have is very nice. That means, he gets the sofa. So the father and mother were very devout devotees. So they never refused to give him whatever he wanted, But the son got really angry. So what the heck is this? This guy's coming up here. He's pretending to be a sadhu, He said, oh, your car is very nice. And all of a sudden he gets the car. The family gives it. So he came one day and he said, oh, this thing is very nice, And then the son went crazy. He got a hatchet. And he said, oh, my dear sadhu, I love your feet. I love your feet. I want to see them always. He had a hatchet. He's trying to cut his feet off. And the sadhu jumped up like this and started running, and the boy kept running after him and trying to chop his feet off, and he never came back again. Okay, so so in the previous verse, it had already been clearly mentioned that the Kumaras were liberated persons. Viditatma tattva means one who understands the truth of self-realization. One who does not understand truth of self-realization is called ignorant. But one who understands the self, the super self, and their interrelation and activities in self-realization is called Viditatma tattva. Although the Kumaras were already liberated persons, they nevertheless became angry. This point is very important. Becoming liberated does not necessitate losing one's sensual activities. Sense activities continue even in the liberated stage. The difference is, however, that sense activities in liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness, whereas sense activities in the conditioned stage are enacted for personal sense gratification. Okay. Okay, so the difference is, however, that sense activities in liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness, whereas sense activities in the conditioned stage are enacted for personal sense gratification. So that's the, let's say, dividing line. And you might not be able to understand right away if someone is genuine sadhu or not. But eventually, a person who's not genuine will reveal himself by what he says, and by what he does. And so therefore, if one has material desires, that'll be revealed rather quickly. And then you can understand this is not really a sadhu. But however, sense activities continue even in the liberated stage. The difference is, however, that sense activities in liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness. Then what does that mean? Well, that means that we have senses, and Krishna has senses also. So the dividing line between what is bona fide and what's not bona fide is when we work uniquely to please the senses of Krishna, we are bona fide. And if we work to please our own senses, we're not bona fide. Now, let's say taking prasadam is pleasing your senses, but it's within the, let's say, perimeter of serving the Lord, because you receive Mahaprasadam, you're supposed to take it. You're not supposed to ignore it. And but the devotees do not overeat and do not undereat. They just eat enough to maintain the body and soul together. So if you see a sadhu who's big and fat, you know that he's not really following the process. And there are a lot of really fat sadhus in India. Even in ISKCON, there are a few fat people. But generally, a sadhu only eats, let's say, a minimum to keep body and soul together. And that way they don't have to sleep as much and have much more energy, as long as they're eating prasadam. So it says the difference is, however, that sense activities and liberation are accepted only in connection with Krishna consciousness, whereas sense activities in the conditioned stage are enacted for personal sense gratification. Well, you can notice it if a person is acting only for their personal sense gratification, it will become evident very quickly. And you can also notice when there's a genuine sadhu who sense activities are simply to serve Krishna. And it says here, sense activities continue even in a liberated state. It's not that you stay in some kind of trance, meditating and don't speak or anything like that. No. You'll be speaking, you'll be dancing, you'll be chanting, you'll be engaged in all kinds of activities, but not for sense gratification, only to please the Lord. Okay, we'll stop right there. Any questions, comments?
Hare Krishna. Anyone has any question or comment online? So indeed, the last 2 days was reading some of the Vaikuntha description and then what we have seen in Sri Balaji installation.
Yeah. Description of the kingdom of God.
Kingdom of God. It was actually, I was able to relate to what all the activities that were planned and how they're done.
Now, who's going to make those garlands? They have to make, it's not going to be as opulent as yesterday, but someone's making garlands for the deities.
Yeah, I think we have a garlands team led by Bhakti Priya Mataji.
Bhakti Priya Mataji. She's like a super, she's like a Gandharva. More than a Gandharva. It's like a resident in the spiritual world. He gets everything done properly.
Yes, very bold, very bold. I hope Mataji's, she's not online, but will communicate.
Okay, all bless you, Prabhupada. Thank you very much. We'll start with text 32.
Yes.
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Prabhupada ki jai.